A very tough year with statistics. So we'll cover last year statistics, just comparing it to a one-year change for 2019 to 2020, and then at the end I'll cover where we're at overall with crime since 2016, so you get a bigger picture. We always look at 6-month, 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, we always talk about. So for the first one, the violent crime last year, and this is no shock to anyone, it went up 20%. It was an incredible year for violence and gun violence in particular, but violent crime obviously includes all forms of violent crime. One of note is the domestic violence and part of our violent crime, and that did not change very much. It was at 36.6% of our violent crime came from domestic violence. I have a couple ways of looking at that, and I'm sure Jennifer will talk more on that. For me, that could be that the crime didn't go down, or we actually have people actually reporting more crime because they're more comfortable and there's other avenues for them to report the crime. But I'll let Jennifer expound more on that. But it's a very disheartening statistics just the same, because it stayed pretty high. Obviously the worst one of all of them is the murders from last year and the homicides, up 100%. And I've talked several times about a lot of bigger cities experienced a lot of crime going up and homicides going up, but that was 50, 60, 70%. Ours went up a legit 100%. We jumped all the way up to 36 murders, which obviously is the highest for Rockford. And while we're continuing to solve some of those and continue to increase the solve rate for last year, we're still nowhere near where we need to be. Last year, I will say we are confident a lot of those murders were with two particular factions that were having disagreements throughout the year, and it was kind of a tit-for-tat thing between those two. We are working steadfast with all of our partners, federal, state, and local, to continue to address those two particular groups as well as all the other shootings that are occurring in the city. The domestic violence homicides for the year was 5% of them. There was 2 of them last year. Again, I'll let Jennifer expound more on that. The next slide shows the homicide or murder across the country map, or across the city map. You can see the high concentration in the center of the city, kind of the traditional area where we see most of our violent crime and shootings. It still remains steadfast in those areas. Some of those areas are lower income. A lot of them are minority, people of color neighborhoods where we have a lack of trust with the police, and where we didn't get out into the neighborhoods at all last year. We saw a spike in the shootings in those areas and the murders in particular, and that is, in my mind, no doubt equated to the fact that we were not out in the neighborhoods building bridges and building relationships throughout the whole year. Aggravated assaults for last year went up 32%. Again, just another variant of the violent crime. The next one is a very concerning one. The victims struck by gunfire went up to 171 people struck by gunfire last year. That went up obviously 108%, and we have been driving that down over the years, but that went way up. Those are all, anybody hit by gunfire, it's a game of inches between whether or not they're a homicide victim or a shooting victim. So that's a very concerning number. The gunfire throughout the year, these are the verified gunfire incidents. Again, if you look at the concentration of the area where they occur, it's where we have traditionally seen most of our violent crime with our gun crime. It hasn't expanded out much. We did see some uptick on the far east end at the hotels. Last year there was quite a number of incidents at our hotels, at the various hotels, not just one hotel. We had a couple murders out there and some shootings. It seemed some of our drug crimes increased out there as well. Gang members and drug dealers taking advantage of the low hotel rates or whatever was going on last year. They moved out there, and we had several incidents, which we're addressing with the hotel ownerships. The hotel owners are working with our community service officers to try and drive that down as well. The next stat just goes hand in hand with the gun violence that we had last year. 281 guns recovered. That's up 72% from the year before. Again, another stat that went up dramatically last year related to the violent crime. And then to the good news, if there is good news to be found in these next slides. Property crimes went down 17%. I think you could attribute that a lot to people were at home, not that many people were out. I think that's another variant of the pandemic. The robberies also went down 11% last year. While I'd like to think it's because of all the people we put in jail or the robbers we caught, I think that's also less people were out and stores were closed. And I think that also drives down those numbers. Auto theft remained about the same. It went down 2%. That kind of remains the same year to year, or has. The next one, narcotics recovered. Our drug unit obviously was hampered through most of the year, as was the patrol division, as was every other division. Doing search warrants and having contact with people, meeting with informants or going into people's houses for search warrants, that was all very, very limited last year. So the seizures obviously went down some, but I do like that the stat at the bottom, or the number at the bottom, the prescription drugs, that is a big problem in houses. It doesn't get a lot of attention in Rockford. It does across the country. We don't talk about it much, but prescription drug addiction of kids getting hold of the parents' prescriptions, or prescriptions of friends' parents in the house, that's a big problem. So getting rid of those drugs out of the house is a huge help to us. We'll jump to now to do the 5-year. This is kind of more the ones that I like to utilize and command staff like to utilize. We always talk about the 6-month, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and then 10-year trends. 2016 to 2020, if you look at the overall violent crime comparison, we are still down 15.7%, but that's nothing compared to what we were down up and through 2019, where we were down double-digit numbers of 30 to 40% in some categories. That's now been reduced down to 15.7% over the 5 years for the violent crimes. The 2016 to 2020 homicide, last year, again, just blew us out of the water with statistics. 2019, we were down 31% murders, and then we jumped way up 38.5 with the 100% increase in homicides. The domestic violence comparison from 16 to 20 is up 11%. Last year we were up again 3.5%. Again, I'll let Jennifer speak more on that, but I also think that is because we have more people reporting it and reaching out for help. I think that's part of it. And I think the state's attorney and the courts, I think everybody's getting on board. I give a lot of credit to Jennifer Cacciapaglia and pushing it forward from the mayor's office, getting the training out there to the officers, and also getting the public to notice we have a problem here with domestic violence. The 2016 to 2020 comparison, calls for service. This is a very encouraging one. We continue to see a drop in calls for service for the officers. It continues to go down, which is a good sign. For us, it's a good sign that hopefully we've turned the tide and we're getting less calls for service because there's less crime occurring. The flip side to that could be, last year people didn't call us because they didn't want any police coming to their house. They didn't want to have contact with police, another possible variant from the pandemic. And then the last one, it shows the overall comparison, property crimes, robberies, auto theft, ag assaults. Over the 5 year, those are very encouraging numbers for us. I'd like to see them even go up more. They are down in all categories. However, last year took away a lot of, I think, the overall positive numbers because our violent crime was so high and the murders were so high.